Hello there, I'm Dominic St-Pierre. You're listening to Go Podcast. This will be a solo episode today. So yes, it's kind of hard to line up guests. So there will be some solo episode here and there to fill out the gaps. That being said, if you if you are working on something and you are really passionate about something, you would like to talk about that in this podcast, and you think that it's worth something for others, reach out to me, and that could be interesting. I'd like to get some interviews with I don't know, people that are doing open source and people that are doing interesting things in their day-to-day work, or just if you have a project in Go and anything that relates to Go and sound interesting, well, reach out to me and we can discuss that a little bit. You might also be seeing, as I'm seeing myself, a lot of Go 122 resources that are popping here and there. It's kind of all over the place in a sense. Not as big as when the generics came out, I would say, but very close. So that's a very, very great new release that the Go team did, and they should be proud of that. I really like how the language is shaping up. The tooling and everything is staying, I don't know, true to what it was at first. The backward compatibility is very interesting. We've saw with this release the first apparition of a V2 package inside of the standard library. So I mean, this is always interesting to see how the Go team is using the same thing that we have to make sure that we do have a backward compatibility with Go 1, which is very interesting and should be something that we, as much as possible, could want to replicate inside our own project or library and things like that. I mean, this is great. I also recently cloned the language itself. So I always dabbled and checked the Go source code on GitHub and whatnot, but I finally decided to clone it, and I find myself very often going to packages and reading the code, how they do that and things like that. I was interested mostly to the JSON package recently, but I don't know. You should do that. Once you have that on your local computer, you will probably, well, maybe if you are like me, a little bit curious, you will start to peek a little bit inside that package, and it's very interesting to see their code, and it's I think it's a good way to get good practice and whatnot on Go. The code is very clean, and yeah. It's just interesting. So back to Go 122. So yes, I mean there's a lot of I don't know, small articles, bigger articles and video out there. So I mean I won't go into too much detail here for sure. I did an episode on iterators two or three episodes ago, something like that, before Go 122 was released. So yes, I mean this is a great release for sure. So what are we going to talk a little bit today? Well, you might guess it based on the title for sure. So, which is at the moment maybe not, but yeah, let's say TDD or not to TDD. So I mean, testing is such an interesting part of all programming languages and communities. This is something I'm realizing as I'm getting older and going from one community to other. It's always it's a touchy subject, to say the least. And TDD, it is inside its own category, I would say. Some people are really, kind of, quote unquote religious about that. Um, so I mean, should you do that or not? Well, I don't have this definitive answer, and as most things, it depends on your current scenario and the project that you're building and things like that. Um, it's a very very nice way of shaping your code for sure. The thing that I want to maybe try to put that into the minds of listeners, at least, is we should be careful with being dogmatic about anything in software engineering, in my opinion, because I mean, I don't. I'm inside the camp of people that don't think that TDD should be used everywhere. If that makes any sense, I'm not saying that it's not good or that nobody should use that. It's not that at all. And maybe it would be easier with some example. So let's say you have a function that needs to accept some input and return some output, and it should do some processing on the input. So whatever, do some algorithm and things like that. Maybe some calculation. It could be anything. But let's say you have a simple scenario like that. Whatever it is that this function is doing, it's kind of an easy way to use TDD, in my opinion, and probably, well, I mean, in my experience, it's one of the best way that I'm personally using it when I want to evolve a function that does not involve any dependency injection or any third party, anything like that. So there's no external tool in here. It's just a pure function. Well, yeah, you can think of in a functional programming function, for example. It's a function that accepts something and returns something, and it's not dependent of anything else. This to me is a super great example of where test-driven development is going to help me, shape this algorithm while I'm writing the implementation. I make sure that first I have some tests to attempt to generate some failure or some edge cases and whatnot. But the point is, it's working very great for me for that type of situation. When I saw that it might not be as, I don't know, as legit, or I don't have the right word here, but where it's a little bit more difficult is when you are kind of starting to build, let's say you want to build some kind of packages that will have some external usage, and you don't really know at this moment, what are those things that you're going to export and whatnot. In that situation, I felt I still feel that using TDD is a little bit more tedious, because my design of the package might change a lot from iteration to iteration, and now I need to change so many code in the test, and it's controversial, because this is also the goal of having some tests and using some TDD, is that it should make sure that everything is still working. I understand that for after a long time, but once you are during the time that you are designing this package, you might not even be at the full implementation time, but you're just still designing what should be exported from that package, and you are still playing around. If there is some dependencies that will need to be passed along, how do you do that? And this is where TDD is getting a little bit complex for me, at least. I know that there is a lot of people that would never do that without doing any tests first. myself, I just always come to the same end point where my test is so out of sync with where my head is, because I'm already, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 steps ahead of the test, and now changing both sides it's just, I don't know, it just don't make sense. So what I tend to prefer to do when I'm writing a Go package that will have some export and whatnot, I tend to play with it a little bit by hand until I have the desired output that I want, until I'm satisfied with the general API of that package, if that makes sense, and then I should start to write tests for the implementation and things like that. Because and maybe I'm doing something wrong. I don't know. I'm not an expert in that for sure. It's always like I'm getting into the states of either my tests are a little bit out of sync, and now I don't know, I'm a little bit discouraged, and I say, you know what, screw that, I will write tests later. And that's always a dangerous thing to say, because we all know that there's a good chance that there will never be any test. I believe it's a super hard question to answer. When should you use that? Because there's obviously no doubt in my head, because I've seen that so many times. I was part of a long-lived software, 20 years, that we're not having any tests at some point. Any tests never in those projects, because there weren't any tests at the beginning. And doing tests after the fact, let's say you're building a system and there's no test for some reason. I started in early 2000. It was not very popular to do testing, especially in smaller company, I would say, smaller teams. So if your software or your system is running in production for, I don't know, 2-3 years, I highly doubt that there will ever be a good test suite for that system. And even if the company would be willing to do that, it's just very, very hard. There's always something that will be prioritized before writing the test and things like that. It's the after the fact. So I believe that this is why test-driven development is such. It seems like it's probably the best way to ensure that at least a decent amount of tests will be created, meaningful tests, because the goal of having a test suite is obviously to have some kind of meaningful test, and this is another topic in itself. Sometimes there's some tests that just don't, they are there, but I mean, they are not testing anything. So this is something I think that test-driven development is really good at. I believe that it make you create a little bit more meaningful tests, and you do have that. So that's a very, very interesting point for that. Does that mean that you should blindly follow the test-driven development way of doing things? So this is a little bit where I tend to I have difficulties to do that. Writing a test, making it fail, going to do the implementation, testing, continuing. I do appreciate this workflow sometimes. I just so it depends what you are building. if there is a lot of external dependencies and the tests that you're going to create are mostly integration tests at the end of the day, I'm not sure. I don't know. I would still prefer to probably write a little bit of my implementation, then write some tests, and continue like that. So yeah, the bottom line is that I don't believe that there is any answer to that. And like I was saying, I mean, yes, in our industry, we tend to really, really love our workflow and our ideas, and we are kind of a little bit dogmatic, like I was saying. We tend to adopt something and oh wow, this is the way to go. There's no other way to go. I feel a little bit like TDD is sometimes sometimes the end all be all aspect of tests, because I understand that maybe it's there because sometimes if a certain size team does not add up this, there might not just be tests or valuable tests, and between not really having a good test suite and using TDD, I would force a team to use TDD any day for sure. But yes, I mean it's still very hard to get used to that mindset, and I need to see that in a real action. I need to really see something, someone that is very, very I don't know, used to do that in the type of application that I typically don't really like to do TDD, and I would very, very much appreciate someone showing me how they do that in that typical application. For instance, let's say that you have a very, very simple web application. I mean, sometimes the TDD aspect will I mean it would stop or slow down a little bit the development, and what are you testing at the end of the day? Or you're testing the endpoint. So I mean the net HTTP server is very well tested. Are we going to test the query to the database and things like that? I mean those things are not really worth testing. So, but like I was saying, for algorithmic functionalities, I do believe that that TDD is the way to go. So as most things, it depends. Your mileage might vary, and this is just a couple of thoughts here. So don't feel bad if you're not using it all the time. And if you haven't tried that, it's really worth trying this. It's a tool that you can add to your tool belt, and once you have that, even though you might not use it all the time, it's still very valuable, I think, to at least know a little bit or get familiar with that workflow, because it do help immensely for some certain aspect. In my opinion, it's a little bit less useful sometimes, but yeah, this is where good judgment come to play. And I mean, at least please have any kind of test suites or for your system and your project. So this is probably the only takeaway to have from this, from all of this this episode, is that, well, make sure you're testing your code. All right, see you next week.